Well, without further ado, um, every day we face challenges personally, professionally, and expectations to deliver a high, and the cost of living is tough for a lot of people and businesses. We can't fix everything, but what we can do is offer some skills and support to tackle difficult times. Along with the sunshine outside, which I must say is just breaking through here after heavy fog, I bring you another ray of positivity with our presenter, award-winning trainer and author, Jo Chill from Imaginarian Learning and Development. Welcome,
Oh,
Jo.
thank you very much indeed. Yes, and welcome from me as well. So, yes, as has already been mentioned, Joe Cheel, Imaginarium Learning and Development. And just a kind of a quick background on why this chap here, i.e., me, my background is psychology. So, many years ago, 30 plus years ago, I did a degree in philosophy and psychology, and then a master's degree in organizational development, which is really my focus was about the psychology of organizations. I've then been working with organizations from kind of very small organizations, SMEs, and very small through to kind of big corporates as well over the last 30 years. My fascination is leadership. My fascination is resilience. Hence, I think that's why I'm here. Again, just sort of part of my background, after the degree in philosophy and psychology, I trained as a psychotherapist. Now, I did that and then fairly quickly kind of moved away from that. I still do coaching and mentoring one-to-one, but I left that behind, and moved more into organizational settings. But it's all still there. And I think our ability, our capability to bounce back when life throws us a googly or a curveball, is just a great skill, and is, I think, is the more I live life, the more I kind of see that as there is we can, as Vicky mentioned already, we can't control everything about the environment around us, and just look at the kind of the news and the what and what's happened now. We can't control that stuff, but what we can control is how we're responding to that, but also what's going on in here. And I'm not saying that's always easy, because we also have a lifetime of conditioning. And that's not necessarily something we're going to solve or resolve all of our conditioning. We're not going to solve or resolve that in, sort of 45 minutes. However, this is about business, of course, but if you're running a business, what is the center of your business? It's you. And in terms of having a resilient business, well, obviously your business is your business. And in that sense, that whatever your service you offer or the product that you make or however that works, um, you know, you're the expert in that field. I hope you're the expert in that field. But of course, no matter what happens around you, and whether we're kind of in, it seems in certain industries we're in quite kind of tough times right now, whether you are facing those tough times, you're at the center of that. And it's your capability to handle that and to keep going, in that sense, is how well your business is ultimately going to do as well. So that's the kind of the premise of where we're going today or this morning, with regard to resilience. I think that's probably enough about me for the moment. There will be stories as we go through this. But what I wanted to share with you, there will be, by the way, a two-side handout, that will come to you, I think, after the event, which will contain some of the models and concepts and ideas that I'm sharing with you now. And on that note, the other side of what I do and love doing, is what's called modeling. Now, that doesn't mean modeling catwalk, hello. I'm talking about modeling behavior, modeling human behavior, psychological modeling, if you like. I am fascinated by people who are successful at whatever their field happens to be, whether they're a successful negotiator, leader, presenter, trainer, or simply those people that seem to be able to, for example, bounce back more effectively, those people that we regard as resilient. What are they doing which is different to folks that are less resilient or not bouncing back or kind of collapsing out? So that's what fascinates me, has done ever since I was a little kid. And instead of getting jealous about people being successful, I fortunately, I kind of would ask myself, how do they do that? And then I'd get curious, and I'd either get interested in that or not, and move on. That's fine. But that's the kind of that's so the vast majority of the models and ideas and tips and techniques and tools that I want to share with you are from my own experience over the last 30 years of modeling successful people. So hopefully they will resonate with you. Uh, they're designed to be practical, ultimately, as well as thought provoking. But that's enough of all that. You want to know what it's all about. What is it all about? Okay, well, let's start with resilience. In terms of interaction, by the way, obviously, I am staring right now at a big TV screen of me. I am literally talking to myself. Now, over the last few years, I've got reasonably good at that, but it is slightly weird. However, if you do have any questions, observations, revelations, applications, or even contradistinctions, which is a nice way of saying you don't agree with me. And that's absolutely fine. Nothing I say is true. It's ideas in that sense. When it comes to human beings, very rarely is anything absolutely true. But if you have any of those things, questions, observations, revelations, applications, contradistinctions, please feel free to put those into the chat. There is no PowerPoint. Uh-oh, what's he going to do then? I have the old tried and tested flip chart, which I will use from time to time to share ideas with you. But let's start at the beginning. Resilience. If I was to ask you what your definition or description of resilience is, that would be very interesting, and hold that thought in mind right now, because if that it doesn't fit with what I'm talking about, then again, please feel free to put that into chat. But one of the classics, the metaphor that gets used is bounce back. The ability we get knocked down, but we get up again, and it's the how efficient are we at bouncing back? How long do we stay just lying down and kind of going, oh, that's enough of all of that? How long does it take for us to bounce back up? Well, that's cool. And if we kind of say the most successful people in terms of resilience are able to bounce back more efficiently and effectively, that's brilliant. But that still doesn't really answer the question. It's still a metaphor, and it still doesn't tell us what do they do. That's the bit I want to share with you. So there are a few things, and the first one is around the bounce back. What do people do? So here's tip number one, okay, and that's what's called outcome focus. So those people that get back up more quickly, instead of ruminating and sitting on the floor going, why? Ow, that really hurt, etc. What they tend to do is pretty quickly they go, okay, right, where am I trying to get to? What am I trying to achieve? So, where am I trying to get to? What am I trying to achieve? Those are both outcome questions. They're directional. When we ruminate, when we stay stuck, when we're in kind of what's called problem mode, what's happening is we're just kind of sitting in it, and wondering why. Now, sometimes it's worth looking at causes. Why did that happen in the sense of so that I don't do that again? If that's genuinely what we're doing, then that's practical. But when we get into kind of like wanting to blame, the client customers or the clients or the government or the people next door or who, whatever, that's still problem state at that moment. We're still in problem mode, going around in circles. And you'll see some people sometimes genuinely get stuck in that space. Honestly, I think getting stuck in that for too long is a wee bit depressing. I'm not necessarily talking clinical depression there. I'm talking just it's just not a happy place to be. And of course, life happens, as I say, things sometimes it's a whole number of things. It's not just one thing, there's like this and then that and then that and then that, and then you get kind of like, oh, I give up with it all. So for somebody, if you ever find yourself saying that question, like, I give up or what's the point, then that means probably still in problem state at that point. Now, the question, powerful question, as I say, where am I trying to get to? What is it I'm trying to achieve? Focuses you back on track, gets you pointed in a direction. Now, I want to share with you a model here, which I'm going to write on here. And I don't think this is in the handout, so this is a kind of like an added extra here. This is my go-to model now for coaching, and potentially in mentoring, for change management, for problem solving, but specifically right here, right now for resilience. And of course, this is what trainers and people like me do. We come up with these acronyms. We sit, kind of like we travel. We're running a course the next day. We're sitting in a Premier Inn, staring at the wall, going, oh, and then we come up with ideas as to what these models are. But this is mine. This is my contribution to the world, or one of them. Now, when I stand up, by the way, that means something's about to happen. And what it means is I'm about to write on the flip chart here. So let's test this pen just to make sure that it's going to come through okay. The acronym is prompt. And one of the reasons I like this, by the way, is because resilience, we think of it as a thing that we have, and that's okay. I build my resilience. I have this resilience. It's like I went and bought it from Marks and Spencer's or wherever, any good places, Lidl, cool, anything. I bought. It's like I have resilience, but that's cool. But I also think resilience. Think of it as a process. Not just that we become resilient, because that again implies that suddenly one day, I am now resilient. It's a bit like going to the gym one day going, I am now fit. I don't ever need to go to the gym again. It is a process. And so every time we get knocked down, because I'm still in the bounce back kind of zone here, we are potentially then going into it is a problem. And if business is not going according to plan, sometimes that can be the problem. And even from my own perspective, as I say, I've been kind of doing what I do for 30 years, but I've noticed personally that it's quieter at the moment. I'm genuinely hoping things will pick up again. And that's potentially because of the big picture of what's going on, politically, geopolitically, etc., etc. And I think there's all sorts of reasons as to why that is. Different sectors being affected in different ways, and the reason why I mention that is if with your business, if you are dealing with different sectors, you'll find some of them I think are probably relatively safe at the moment, whereas others are just kind of going, no, we're shutting the door to pretty much everything, and we're going very insular, for example, or we're not investing at the moment, or we're not spending at the moment. And that's challenging, particularly if you're running your own business or you're a small business. So that adds to that problem state. Where's the next client? Where's the next customer? However, when we are in problem state, so I'm talking like this is how I'm feeling at the moment, whatever it may be. The next phase is readiness. So that's the next phase. So remember, we're talking phases here. When I'm in problem state now, I know, the world or whatever it is, or stupid computers or whatever it might be. And then I kind of go, okay, phase one. I'm in phase one right now. Let's keep moving. Readiness is that space, that place where we want to move out. I don't want to feel like that anymore. An example, many years ago, used to run stress management courses. And now, nowadays we talk more about resilience and well-being. But at the beginning of the session, I'd kind of go around the room and sort of say, okay, so what would you like from the day today or the half day today? This stress management course, and I'd have a whole bunch of people just go, I don't want to feel stressed. Okay, that's kind of cool. It means that they've made a decision potentially that they have been stressed. That's problem state stress. And now they're in this weird space of, I don't want that anymore. I've had enough of that, whatever that might be. And that's called the readiness state. That's part of it, where there's a mental shift. And if I may share something about myself, which I now realize, of course, is being recorded to the world, to YouTube. But one of the things I find, and particularly, Christmas time for me, nom, 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 nom. And then I stood on the scales, and it's like that old classic of like, oh my God. And I was looking in the mirror and thinking, oh, I'm looking like my dad. Like I'm putting on whoa, wait now, lovely fella, my dad. Well, he's no longer with us, but a lovely fella nonetheless. However, for me, it was that tipping point, there's decision point that went in, a switch that went on in my head of like, oh, I need to do something. I need to lose weight. I need to do something about this. So that's what I call the readiness point, the genuine point of where it's like a switch goes on in your head. And it's like, right, I've had enough of sitting around. I've had enough of mooching, I've had enough of blaming everyone else. I'm kind of like, I don't know how yet. I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm ready. I'm ready to move on. That's the readiness state. Then, and I already mentioned this one, the outcome state. So outcome mode, that's where we kind of go, okay, had the problem, da da da, don't want the problem anymore. So what do I want? And that was the question I used to ask people on the stress management course was when they'd say, I don't want to feel stressed, I'd say, okay, when you're not feeling stressed, what will you feel? Or when you're not being stressed, what will you be? What, and that leads to when we get to something that's positive and directional. And when I say positive, I don't mean yay, happy days positive. I just mean positively stated. It's towards something. That's when they kind of might say, I'd like to feel more calm. Okay, cool. We can work with that. Or I'd like to feel more confident. Great, we can work with that. There's still states. Or I'd like to manage my workload. Or something like that. Yeah, good. Okay, that's cool. I'd like to reduce my workload. I like to whatever it. That's fine. That's directional. There's an outcome there. We can now work towards that. But before we get there, this is my favorite bit, the model. Da, da, da. So the modeling part, once again, is okay, have I done something similar before? Because, this is where I am now. That's where I want to get to. Have I done something like this before? Have I been through this before? Um, and that's a kind of like, oh, maybe I have actually, because we have all had a life. We've all kind of like had experiences. Have I been through something similar before? If I haven't, if I no, I've never ever experienced this before, ever in my life, well, that's fine because then we can start to model other people. Okay, so who else? Who else might have gone through an experience or got to where I want to get to? And that, by the way, that was always my fascination. As I say, even like as a kid, some of my parents' friends were certainly better off than we were, and maybe they had like a lovely car or something like that. So even as I don't know, an 8-year old, I'd be looking at this car going, wow, well, that's amazing. But rather than kind of feeling envious that, oh, we don't have one of those and they do, I was genuinely like, why did they do that? Or if they had a really lovely house or something like that, as a little kid, I was like, wow, like how did they get to this space? How did they get to this place? So I was always interested in modeling. Now, if you can't think of somebody else, if you don't know somebody else who's good at what you're wanting to do, then there are books, there's YouTube, there's videos, there's all sorts of ways of learning out there. So the modeling is that, okay, what are some options to get me to where I want to be? Um, and then once we've kind of explored that a little bit, and by the way, I've been playing a wee bit with ChatGPT or ChatGTP, which just is a mouthful. I've been playing a bit with that recently. It's interesting. There's some kind of like it comes up with some really cool stuff sometimes and just some mad stuff other times. But that's also modeling. It's also another way of kind of going, well, let's see what the AI reckons, and then I'll investigate that properly afterwards. But it's just another way. I'm just kind of going, these are some of the resources that are around us that we could actually have a look at. It's going to go, well, I can't be the only one in the world who's experienced this. The history of people kind that have gone through. There's so many people have had so many situations. Um, anyway, I don't need to go on. Now, the next bit is process. Okay, so this is what we would call a solution. So we have, we've taken us ages, but now we're finally getting to the solution. The solution, by the way, is the steps we take to get us to our outcome. So that's the process. What are the steps? Okay, I've researched my models and different ways of achieving something. Maybe, I've done it this way, I've done it that way, could do it this way, could do it that way. So how am I going to actually go about this? And then we start setting a plan. At this point, I think really it starts to happen here anyway. Outcome, we start to become more confident. And definitely more resilient at this point because we're now no longer focusing on the world, woe is me. Now it's like, okay, I want to get over there. How am I going to do it? And then the T is, either test or take action. Do something, take action. Don't just have your plan and sit with your plan and go, nice plan. I have a Gantt chart and everything now. Look at me. You want to do something, take action, obviously, in order to get to that place that you want to get to. And that will change. And they'll, the kind of the outcome may shift and change over time. And that's okay. It's not locked in. There's still flexibility within this for you to move forward. Now, I hope, first of all, that makes sense to you. I also hope that you can see that when we're not in a good place, that simply we are at phase one. Not simply, but we are at phase one. We're here. And even that in and of itself, if I remind myself, whatever it may be, and it's like, okay, phase one, let's keep moving now. Where am I trying to get to? I don't want that anymore. Where am I trying to get to? And off we go. Okay, cool. Now that's kind of a big model. And as I say, the tip in there is the question. To have two questions that you ask yourself. Why did I put five? Have two questions. Just the two will be fine. Where am I trying to get to? What am I trying to achieve? Oh, I know. Have you ever been in a meeting with somebody, or had a conversation with somebody, and they've gone, "Oh, I've got this problem." Oh, and they tell you about their problem, whether you want to hear it or not. They tell you, they could be a friend, family member. So they told you about the problem. So you're being helpful, and then you say to them, "Oh, why don't you do this? Or you could do that. Or I know, what about doing this?" And then they come back to you with things like, yeah, but the problem with that is, yeah, or the difficulty there would be, or the trouble with that is, just as a tip, what's happening there is we're trying to jump straight from problem to process. We're actually trying to jump straight from problem to solution. We're kind of going, what you could do is, okay, the verb of doing, that's really the process. So if you're in that weird conversation with someone and you hear those words, or in a meeting, business meeting with your own team, for example, and there's an issue and it's like, what are we going to do about it? Well, actually, a better question is, where are we trying to get to? What are we trying to achieve? So again, just get you out of that weird loop of the problem with that. The difficulty there is that negativity spiral that goes down, is the outcome questions again. Hold on a second before we go any further. Where are we trying to get to? What are we trying to achieve? Get agreement on that, and then boom, you're off. Anyway, cool, good, all part of resilience. Now, so that's the kind of the first one, is the bouncing back. What is bouncing back? Well, it's this. It's move forward. Next, we have. So I like the idea of having like a flexi screen. So this is part of resilience. Where this came from, there's plexiglass. The kind of it's sort of relatively flexible, wrap around. You can see through it. And it's almost like one of the metaphors of resilience is that strength and almost armor of, here I am, and I'm kind of marching forward. And uh, the armor is great for protection, so we are protected. That's the positive. But armor can also be a bit of a prison in a sense. I can't even imagine wearing armor all the time or even ever, quite frankly. But an interesting concept. Whereas the idea of the flexi screen is like a protection, but we can see through it. We can interact with the world. It's just like a little force field thing, a bubble that we can take with us. Now, why would we want one of these? Because let me start with the news. Okay. Now, I don't know whether this is true for you, but certainly what can happen during times of challenge and weirdness, and it happened in the pandemic as well as now. There's almost like this desire in many people to kind of go, what's happening on the news right now? And then either we're on a phone, just check the news. Oh, interesting. What the news? And update on the news. Watching TV. Every time the news is on, all the channels, the news channels, 24 hour news. What is the news? Well, what we're like, really, what are we doing to ourselves at that point? We're just kind of inundating ourselves, and whether there's, depending on what news we're reading as well, by the way, if it's more kind of newspaper and political, the biases on those, and we're getting a propaganda in a particular direction, but that becomes hard to filter out, to keep the flexi screen up at that particular point. So that becomes a choice of, how much do I do that? Social media. I mean, again, for me right now, just on my Facebook or whatever that I sometimes go on, just all political right now. And the vast majority is political. And honestly, I can scroll. What do they call it? Doom scrolling. That says it, doesn't it? Doom scrolling is, I'm just generating for myself a problem state. Uh, so it's what I tend to do with Facebook is, there's various groups that I've joined, which are interest groups, and I kind of just go straight to those instead. Sometimes I'll have a look at what other people are up to and see if anyone's got any good news or done something cool. Um, I find, obviously, from a business perspective, I do find LinkedIn is generally more positive in that sense. It's ideas, or some people are a bit doomy gloomy about every stuff, and sometimes people get political, but less so. And it does seem a wee bit more professional. So that's cool as well. I can kind of share stuff on there. And by the way, if you want to, this is not promoting anything here. I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to join me on LinkedIn after this, please feel free to. Please feel free to. Cool. So yeah, that's part of the flexi job. What do we kind of let in? But we're also like, there's going to be people that we're with. Some people are positive, kind of like very energetic, energized. Some people are kind of like, what did someone call them? A mood hoover. Interesting phrase. Not a phrase I use very often, but it kind of it resonated somewhat. That you got to let you going, hey, how's everything? And then like someone walks in the room and it all just goes at that particular point. Slightly weird. But again, people will say stuff to you. And that's whether it's their opinion about whatever it may be about, again, about the world, or about other people. And it's like, well, what do you let in? And it's imagining that you've got this kind of flexi screen around you that you can bounce stuff off. And again, criticism. If you ever get criticized by somebody, I love this kind of idea of, sure, if you've asked for feedback and someone gives you feedback, that's brilliant. That can be really helpful, even if it's not really very well delivered, or it's a wee bit kind of odd, or negative in some way, or it feels a bit critical. If you've given permission, you've asked for it, and you get it, well, then utilize that. Do something with it. But sometimes people like giving unsolicited criticism, which is interesting. And again, it's your choice what you do with that. You can either kind of just go, okay, thank you very much, and then it just goes donk, bounces off. Or I can kind of, I wonder what that was about, or I could ask them questions about, tell me more about that. What do you mean? Can you give me an example of that, or what was it specifically? Just to see, is there something in there that might be helpful, might be useful. But it's your choice. That's the flexi screen thing, the bubble. About what you take in. Make a choice. It's your choice in that sense as to what to take in. What else have we got here? This is a nice, easy, brief one. The nature of self-esteem. Self-esteem is one of those things that's been around, as a phrase for years and years. Even when I first started out, it was a concept that was well established. Self-esteem. However, if you look at dictionary definition of self-esteem, you tend to find it's kind of how you value yourself, how you regard yourself, your regard for yourself. For me, that's only half the story. And it's, for me, it has to be true self-esteem. If you look at model people with true self-esteem, they don't just value themselves; they equally value other people. So it is self and others. It's understanding I have my rights, and I have my opinions, and I'll express those things. But other people also have rights, and they also have opinions, and that are potentially as valid. Whether I agree with them or not, that's their opinion, and that's my opinion. If we're dealing with fact and evidence-based, genuine evidence-based, that's a different matter. But feelings. We have our own feelings. Okay, yeah, I respect that. Those are my feelings, but someone else can have their feelings as well. That's kind of like that. If I make a decision that's going to affect other people, particularly from a business perspective, if I'm going to make a decision that's going to affect other people, I am thinking about my side of that, my part of that, what's the benefit to me, perhaps, or what's the reasoning from my perspective. But I also want to do from other people's, what's the benefit to other people, or what's the reasoning from their perspective as well. There are a lot of people out there that I think regard themselves, and again, perhaps we're seeing this kind of big picture politically at the moment, who are very kind of big on themselves, do not value other people. Is that truly high self-esteem? I personally, I'd question that. And I'm happy for people to disagree with that and go, no, this is what self-esteem is. But I think kind of healthy, maybe we could call it healthy self-esteem, is where we are equally valuing ourselves and others. There's a phrase some years ago, my wife and I, my wife Melody also does this kind of stuff as well. We both have psychology backgrounds. Oh, the conversations we have. But we wrote a book some years ago called The Relationship Dance, which is about loving relationships, but also applied to other relationships, as business relationships. But there's a phrase I love, which was "speak your truth with kindness." So if you need to say something to, it could be a colleague, it could be your partner, it could be, um, then be straight about it. But it's not like, oh, I'm not going to say anything. You say it, but say it with kindness, so that you are. It's not pointed or pokey poke poke poke, or it's not blamey blame blame. It's not kind of trying to win over on them. It is just simply, this is where I'm at. This is where what I'm experiencing. This is and doing that with a sense of kindness. That all kind of fits for me still massively within resilience, because it's easier, I think, to be resilient if we have a strong, healthy, for self and others, self-esteem. So that's another part of the jigsaw puzzle. Okay, number four. So that's three already. So number four is what's called the growth mindset. Now, growth mindset is not my model, and to be honest, right here, right now, I can't remember. And some of you will know this, and some of you might type it in as to who came up with that model, and I should know. Shame on me for not remembering right here, right now. But the growth mindset. Now, the growth mindset is really ultimately is the belief that we can continue to learn. Thank you very much indeed, Carol Dweck. You are a superstar, Sam. Thank you. This is why I love having other people. This is why I love having other people around. So growth mindset is that space of a belief that I can learn and can continue to learn no matter how old I am, that I will, that I can learn, I can continue to learn. I'm kind of open frame in that sense. When do we learn? I love, by the way, just the word curiosity. Curiosity is known as the rocket fuel for learning. I love that. If you want to learn something, get curious about it, get fascinated by it. So yeah, there's that. That's part of it. For me, there's to bring it to the kind of like the day to day and resilience. We all have experiences which didn't go according to plan, or we have experiences that completely threw us, that shocked us. We didn't. It wasn't even that we had a plan. We didn't even know it was going to happen. And we sort of like went, yeah, but that's all, folks. We sort of dealt with it's ish in the moment in time, or didn't. But then afterwards, some people then beat themselves up. Why didn't I? I shouldn't have. And then I know what I should have. I know what I should have said. We wake up in the middle of the night. Oh, I know what I should have said at that particular point. And it's like, okay, but we can beat ourselves up. That's one option. I don't think that's very resilient, and I think that really throws us to problem states. But actually, a better question. I'm all about the questions here for resilience. A better question is, what could I do differently next time, and what else? So, what could I do differently next time? I'm trying to write the words next time. And what else? Give yourself options. Now, again, as a little kid, I asked myself and other people and did many stupid things like kids do. That's the nature of being a kid. But I was fortunate in a weird kind of way as a little kid. If I didn't get this, is going to sound awful now, but please remember I was a little kid. If I didn't get my own way, I like kids want to get their own way. That's the whole point of being a kid. If I didn't get my own way, then I would kind of sit in somewhere and mutter for a bit to myself. But I would ask myself that question, kind of, if that happens again, what am I going to do? And I was trying to find other ways of handling a situation or deal with a situation, and that included potentially kind of like possibly could have been a bully at school, or it could have been just like my mum or dad saying no, or whatever it is, boundaries being put in place. But I would try and figure out other things that I could do in that situation, and what would happen. So that has probably why I'm in the field of learning and development, because it's a continually learning process then. Of course, by the way, before an event, like for example, if you're going to do a presentation and you're feeling a bit about doing a presentation, you can kind of do that, but preemptively. So you're not saying next time, what will I do differently? You're saying this time, if, what could go wrong, or what questions might I get asked and how will I handle that? Or what could happen and how will I handle that? That's called contingency planning. So you're ahead of the game, proactive, brilliant. The more, if you do that, that's true of projects. For those of you that are involved in projects, and I'm sure some of you are, you will also find that, if you're planning a project, you've got to do a contingency diagram or contingency plan point, or a risk mitigation process of some sort. You identify risks, and then you kind of look at, well, what could we do? How will we handle that? How could we prevent that from happening? How might we deal with it if it happens? So okay, good. So we can be preemptive and proactive with that one. But let's face it, the things that smack us with a mackerel sometimes are the things that we didn't know just didn't know that was going to happen. We couldn't have planned for it because we didn't know. So after the event, then it's like, okay, if that ever happens again, what could I do differently? So that we've then got a bit more of a plan. Here's a picture for you. And for me, this is a picture of confidence, and confidence and resilience go absolutely hand in hand. Okay. If we are in a situation, so this is about being kind of on the spot, i.e., we're in a new situation or we're in a situation. Okay? If we've got no strategies, what I mean by strategies is just simply don't know what to do. I haven't got any kind of go-to points at that point. So I'm going to call those strategies. I know strategies are from big picture. This is detailed strategy. If I've got no strategies, that will freak me out. That because I don't know what I'm going to like. I don't know what to do now. I don't know what to do now. I'm in a new situation. I do not know what to do. That's just being human. But either preemptively or responsively after or on reflection, we start to develop, okay, what could I do differently? I could do this. So that arrow is a direction. I could go in that direction. That's one of my options. What else could I do? So that's the what else question. I don't just want one thing, because if I've got one strategy for dealing with a situation, that's great. What if it doesn't work and we still have that doubt in the back of our head? So what we want to do is develop a number of strategies. So there's another strategy and there's another strategy. And by the way, fairly quickly, this starts to look like something that happened to us a couple of years ago. I've been using this picture, this model for years and years. And then when coronavirus happened, it was like, oh, it's stolen my picture. So I'm going to steal it back again. Let's call this the confidence virus. Okay. So this is a positive thing that we want to develop. And it's the idea that the more strategies we have in a given situation, the more confident we tend to feel. There'll be a saturation point, obviously, where we've just got so many. But if you think about areas of your life and business where you are confident right now, you will have a range of strategies for dealing with whatever that situation is. You'll have a whole bunch of different areas, and it's almost like you'll know because you get less difficult situations or less awkward situations, or you just kind of there's certain areas where you're confident because if something does happen or doesn't go right, or it kind of like you just sort of go, oh, and then you just deal with it. It's not an issue. Whereas once upon a time it might have been an issue, or it might be an issue to somebody else. That's confidence. It's a lovely way of looking at what is confidence. So that gives you confidence is a combination of flexibility and persistence. It gives you that kind of like, okay, that's the get up and go thing again. Where am I going? And we want some of that. Now, um, just the kind of final thing of the elements that I wanted to share with you. The other one was about, again, kind of how we frame the world, how we frame a situation, another person. And then that's all part of filtering again. And you'll see when you get this handout, there'll be what I call, it's going to another page. It's crazy. Let's go with, I call this the windscreen. Now, again, I'm just going with a color here, bubblegum pink. Lovely. Oh, that's nice and strong. I never know until I turn around as to whether a particular color is going to vibe. Now, the idea with the windscreen, we are always looking through a windscreen of life. It's like a metaphor, man. And if you like, on one end of this continuum here, there is, and I'm just going to go real basic with this, the positive, the kind of like the good stuff. That, oh, I like that, makes us feel good. And then at the other end, there is the not so positive, the negative stuff. So let's just apply to the world. Okay. So look at the news if we wanted to or chose to. Well, if that's a continuum of positive to negative, the likelihood is the vast majority of it, let's face it, is going to be over this side. Okay. Now, the idea of the windscreen is that there are some positive things going on out there as well. They're not as reported so often. There was a newspaper that came out, I don't know whether it still exists, but came out years ago that was designed just to be good news. and it didn't sell as well. It didn't particularly sell, and it's almost like we need to know what the bad news is. We want to kind of like, oh, is it? Oh no, which is a sort of survival instinct, by the way. So let's not beat ourselves up about that. But the idea is, actually, if you think, oh, what's the world like? Oh, terrible place, boo. And we focus here, let's say, that's a focus point. We will find evidence around. We'll find evidence for that because actually the reality is it's all out there from negative to positive, positive, negative. There's so much stuff going on out there. If, however, our focus is more, let's say, over here, kind of more over in the positive, we'll find evidence for that. And then people have arguments with one another about the state of the world, and they go, no, it's great, no, it's not, no, yes, no, yes, no. And they're looking at the same world, but they're just looking through different parts of the windscreen. Now, we cannot control the world outside, but we can control where we focus. And for me, I find if I realize that I'm pulling myself over this side, then it's like the windscreen wiper. I just wanted to do the silly noise. That was the only reason I did that. The windscreen wiper is kind of bringing myself back over to this side again. So the idea is focus on this stuff over here, and I'll explain a wee bit more in a moment. Be aware of this stuff. It's not kind of the optimistic, blind optimistic, I think it's called Pollyannaing, it's just like, oh, everything's fine, everything's lovely. It's be aware of this stuff over here. So I'll just write the word aware. And then change what you can, if you can. Influence what you can, if you can. But ultimately, and this is the tough bit, is accepting it is what it is. Now, some people don't like that phrase. I do. I like that phrase. I say it to myself. I don't say it to other people because I don't want to annoy them, but I just say that to myself. It is what it is. That's where I didn't know that I can sit here and kind of go oh, about it all, but that's where we are. It is what it is, whatever phraseology you want to use, but that's just part of the acceptance. And now, can I change anything? Can I influence anything? I need to bring myself back over here. I will give you something in just a second, and I know just in terms of time, we're going to go into Q&A fairly soon. But just hold with me. Give me a little bit more because there's this and another model I want to share with you. Now, of course, this isn't just about the world; it's also about how we feel about ourselves. We can have kind of positive reflections about ourselves. We can have negative. Oh, I'm so rubbish. Oh, I never. I'm no good at this. And da da da. And so where do we focus? Do we focus on the negative stuff? And quite frankly, just looking in the mirror, do we focus on the bits we don't like, or do we focus on like, hey, looking good? Like, oh, the hair out of the, come on, stop it. Which direction do we get? I'm on my own when I'm doing that, by the way. I'm not like kind of, when I'm going, hey, look at that. So just it's just because I know that we need to be focusing on what we do like, what we do enjoy, what is cool, what is working, because this is the mentally healthy and resilient space over that side. It applies to other people, how we feel about other people, like, oh, I don't like them, or I do like them. But even with the people that we don't like, maybe there's some things that they do or are able to do, or that there's certain elements that we can like, particularly if we have to work with them, like personality styles and things like that. So it's like, well, what is working? What does work? What is good? It bothers me a little bit in terms of relationships again, that obviously a couple meet, they fall in love. And I'm talking obviously loving relationships here, and they're over here. Hopefully, anyway, the relationship starts over here somewhere. I love you, no, I love you, no, you put the phone down first, no, you, no, you, first. And then there's all the kind of cutesy, and then so many relationships. I'm going quite high now. So many relationships kind of just drift over a period of time over to this side, with all they can see is what they don't like about each other. That's a very sad space. By the way, Melody and I have been married for over 30 years, so we're doing okay. So we've learned this lesson. That of course, we do things that annoy each other. Of course, we do. But the main focus is over this side. Okay, I don't need to go on. It applies to your job and business as well. But it's like keep focusing on the purpose. Why are you doing what you do? What is it that you love? Keep focusing on that rather than, oh, the marketplace isn't working, this is dreadful, etc. If you're genuinely over that side and caught over that side, then I don't want to put you off, but is this the right business? Am I in the right job? Am I in the right space if I'm genuinely not enjoying any of it? to find a place. I love that idea. What is your passion? Turn that into your profession, and then it doesn't feel like you'll never do any work. It's just you're doing what you love doing within reason. Now, final bit of input from me, and it's linked to this stuff over here. Of course, there's stuff we cannot control. Okay, and that's business. This is a real significant one. Part of my master's degree was investigating or looking into what was called the paradoxes in organizations, the paradox in business, but impossible problems. So I wrote a book some time ago. I've written loads of books, by the way, but solving impossible problems, and this was one of them. One of the models was that if that's my sphere of influence and control, and the problem is outside of my influence and control, well, then that's something I can't solve. Unless I can find someone else who can influence the situation, or I can get a number of people together, enough people together to influence the situation, fine, then that brings it back to influence. But if genuinely government decision, I guess the whole thing about minimum wage and whatever the national insurance and contributions and stuff, which just suddenly throws you financially, that's a government decision. I can't change that. So what we do at that particular point, rather than just getting lost with why has done this to me, is there will be a chain of cause and effect, a dotted line of cause and effect that will impact on you. Okay, from there, there's lots of other problems out there that are not our problems. They're affecting other people. So it just happens to be a problem that affects us. Now, this is metaphorical, of course. I can't change the thing out there. So what I've got to do is focus on this bit here, the impact point. Okay, I can't change the thing out there. So I'm going to have to look at practically the impact point. There's two things. So the question here is, and this could be for you as an individual, personal life, it could be as a business, it could be with a team, where you're actually asking the question, how does that, as you see, I'm all about the questions, how does that affect us or impact on us directly? Question mark. Now, the answer to that is the important question. Okay, when we're kind of getting very lost in that, they've done this, they've done that. It's like, okay, how does that impact on us directly? And it could even be a decision that a client makes, or change that they suddenly want, and there's absolutely no convincing them otherwise. How does that affect us directly, as well as kind of getting on with it? That leads to, I think, two things. Okay, the answer to the question will fall into two categories. One, resources. So usually, for example, budget, time, people, whatever, it's going to affect resources in some way, shape, or form. But of course, to run a business is to manage resources, to lead people. And by the way, that's my distinction between leadership and management. Agree or disagree? We lead people, hearts and minds, taking them with us, get them on board. We manage resources. People are resources because I need you over there getting that sorted out. You're sorting that, delegate, da, 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 da. Okay. But it's resources. But that's part of being in business, is managing your resources, your budget, your time, etc. The other thing that it impacts on is feelings. It makes me feel bad, it makes me feel angry, cross, frustrated, depressed, unhappy, whatever it may be. But ultimately, feelings, your feelings are your feelings. And no one else is responsible for your feelings. You are responsible for your feelings. I hope we can all agree upon that. Who's responsible for your thoughts? You are. Who's responsible for your feelings? You are. And I'm not saying that's easy. The whole thing about managing your emotions is again a life journey of how to do that. But there are methods and means out there, and you will find in the handout. So I'm just acknowledging it and referencing it when you get it. On the flip side, there's a whole bunch. It's almost like a little mini page of what's called positive states. So what you do with that is you don't have to use the ones on the handout. You just go, okay, well, if I'm feeling, and feeling not so good, how do I want to feel differently right now? How do I, and it's like name a positive state. For example, things that are on that page, or confidence, or calm, or inspired, or inspirational. How do I want to feel? In order to change your state from a negative state to a positive state, the first step is actually to name the state you want, so that you've got an outcome, you've got directionality. It's exactly the same as the outcome model here, or the prompt model here. It's like, I don't like the state I'm in. I want to change that. So what is the state that I want? And then we can start focusing in that direction. I think at that point, I have probably done the kind of the main part of the presentation. I hope that's been thought provoking. Hope that's been useful in some way, shape, or form, down to the practical level of questions you can ask yourselves, and it's got you thinking. And I'm guessing at this point, Vicky, do you come back into play at this particular point, or am I still kind of? Are we? Oh, hello. Dun, 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 dun.
I'm
Hello.
just joining you.
Good.
Hello. Fantastic, Joe. Thank you for that. I mean, I know it was an hour long, but the introduction to resilience and understanding the confidence, the resilience, and what that actually means, and the questioning, and taking the time to question the individual problem at the top of your list there. You know, that's the bit that a lot of people, like you said, jump from that to try and resolving it straight away without looking at in between all the little bits. So it was really thought provoking. And I think relatable to everyone, because even I'm sure you'd admit yourself, that doesn't come naturally, one. And two, it doesn't happen all the time. Particularly, I know personally and professionally, a decision has to be made, and it's like you can't really stop and think, and it's trying to get in the mindset of just slow down and question, but you do need to respond in a very short space of time. So, I can really see how it's totally relatable, and I hope our audience can as well, about how personally and professionally you can take this away from today. I think what we want to do in this next bit is I've got some questions. I've got some things that are probably slightly more business driven with regard to how we could potentially help certain situations. So I've just had a quick look at ideas of how we can move this, move this forward, and take some stuff away that's perhaps a little bit practical, whilst questioning ourselves. It's always good to have scenarios to play with. So I'm just, as with everything, my internet goes slow at this time of day. I have no idea why. So I've just sort of highlighted a few things that I thought we could run through, and so I just want to ask a few questions. Please feel free to join in. Ask the questions in the Q&A. There is the option to do it anonymously. So if there's something specific that you just specific within your business that you want to ask, don't be afraid to do so and put it in anonymously. That's absolutely fine. In addition to that, if you want to stay on afterwards for the Zoom meeting, and then you can chat face to face virtually with Joe and myself, you're more than welcome to do that. But I'll just ask a few questions. So Joe, I just with regard to like business owners, how they've got this feeling that they need to do it all and do it now, and how do you change the mindset of someone to just focus on the most impactful ones, the most impactful decisions? So, it's like your brain's all jumbled, isn't it? With things that you need to do and you have no structure. How do you get focus on that?
Okay, cool. I think the first thing is in that sense of, is there anyone else? Am I on my own, having wanting to do all of these various different things, or do I have other people around me? And the reason I mention that is because that taps then into the leadership part of it and management part of it, of actually, and it's all the center point of all of this is going to start from the same place. But it's like, do I have resources around me of people that can help me? And even if it's not staff members, it's like, who else can help? Which we'll get to. Honestly, the first thing, and this is going to tap back to resilience again as well, is writing it down. That's going to sound so horribly obvious, but it is absolutely essential. What sometimes happens is we carry It's like the wake up in the middle of the night, kind of buzzer, busy, buzzer, buzzer, buzzer. Oh, if there's a thing, and then a nervousness about, oh, but what if the thing, and da da da, and then if I'm, and then, I must remember too. Um, if we're trying to hold everything in our head, even our to-do list, it just doesn't, it doesn't work for any length of time. It's the brain's not designed that way to hold all of that kind of information at the top, in short-term memory all the time. So there's two things. Number one, write it down. What are the various different things that I want to do? Even if it just feels like a jumbly list, that's absolutely fine. Just get these things written down. I tend to just work off of I've got like a Word document, which is what I call the master to-do list, which I'll talk about in a second. And it's just simply what's outstanding. What are the things that I want to be doing? There is something magic about writing something down or typing it down, is that it moves it out of here and puts it there, somewhere in front of you or to the side. You can now put it to the side if you want to, in terms of the movement of it, but it makes it objective. It's otherwise it's subjective. It's all buzzing around in our heads. It puts it out there. Have you ever noticed it's easier to solve other people's problems than your own? In general, for most people, what you're doing, and the reason is because it's theirs, it's over there, it's not in here, it's not in my wow face. So by writing it down, one of by the from an emotive perspective as well, if you ever had a situation that didn't go well, or you really feel bad in some way, shape, or form, or upset, or shocked, or whatever it may be, from positive psychology, the most successful strategy for handling emotions, negative emotions about a context or an interaction with a person, is writing it down. You write down what happened and how you felt, and then shred the piece of paper. You don't need to keep it. It's not, like some people talk about having a gratitude journal. That's an American thing. Have a gratitude journal. The things that go well and things you love doing, and yeah, what a great day. Don't be keeping a kind of an ungratitude diary. The kind of the opposite. The kind of like the worst things that happen. You just get rid of it afterwards. It's meant to be part of that process of put it out there, let it go. Emotions want out. Emotions want out. Emotions are a process. And I know you're talking about organizing, but I think there is an emotive element, weirdly, to managing one's time, because we get overwhelmed. Does that mean we get overwhelmed with so much stuff going on? I do love, by the way, that we can be overwhelmed or underwhelmed, but very rarely just simply whelmed, somewhere in the middle. It's just the kind of weird space. But here's the interesting thing: we get overwhelmed, as if like the whelm is over us, kind of putting pressure. We get overloaded, with the workload, as if it's like this thing that's kind of pressing down on top of us. And that's when we're not in the driving seat. So again, resilience, another metaphor, getting in the driving seat. So you are in the driving seat. So here's a kind of next step. You asked me about organizing. I'm going to stand up. That means something's about to happen. Now, so that kind of overwhelmed, too much stuff going on. One is another way of looking at that. Let's go back to that bubblegum pink. That was kind of cool. So you're writing down everything, all the stuff that's outstanding, all the stuff that's in your head in terms of maybe things you need to do or things you want to research or look into, or etc. By the way, I don't know if you've noticed, this is for everybody, language changes over time and the way the metaphors that get used. What I've noticed in meetings years ago, people would sort of go, well, okay, so we need, who's going to look into this? Which I always find an interesting metaphor, because it literally means between one meeting and the next, people just go, I looked into it. It doesn't give you any outcomes or deliverables at the end of it. There's no objectives in that. It's just I looked into it. But now, listen, and again, this is not meant to be political in any way, shape, or form. It's just notice politicians speaking. They're now talking about looking at things. Okay, what you tune in when you're listening to a politician, how many times they say, "But we are looking at that," as if like we're looking at this, we're looking at that. Well, that's not going to change anything. So don't, if you catch yourself saying, well, I'm looking at something, it's like, seriously, that's just like staring at something. That doesn't take action, it doesn't bring action into play. Now, back to here. Let's say you've written down your list of everything, but it's quite overwhelming because there's just way too much to do. Just call that, so that would be there, just call that your master. to-do list. So that's a master to-do list. It's the kind of list of everything that's in your mind. And when you write it down, by the way, you might find that it's pages and pages and pages of different things, which is just as well you wrote it down. Sometimes it's not as many things as you think. However, it's just because there's too many jumbled things going on. Now, have an active to do. So this is genuinely the bit that kind of starts to get back on top of it again. The active to-do list, then scribbly, are things from the master to-do list where we pull things down from there into my active to-do list. This is what I want to focus. You mentioned focus. This is what I want to focus on. And sometimes we have to kind of push things backwards and forwards. That, okay, well, new things come in. So I'm going to have to push that back up into the master to-do list, which might include projects as well that you're either thinking of doing. And the active to-do list, this is going to sound weird, but should only ever have as many things in it or on it as you still feel on top of it. I know that's not correct English, but it's like it should only contain as many things as you can look at it and feel motivated by it and on top of it. Okay. As soon as you start feeling overwhelmed, then you need to push some stuff back into this. So this becomes your kind of like your, it's not really a dashboard, but that's your kind of, that's where I'm focused. That kind of moves me. That what did you do? Like I want to kind of get on with that. Then we can start, planning, prioritizing, planning, etc. And yes, you mentioned, Vicky, about the prioritizing part of that. Is the I can't remember, was it not the most important? The maybe you said impactful. Yeah, cool. What's the most impactful? Well, that's going to be the higher priority stuff. The things that are less impactful and you need to do them, then do them, but do them as quickly as possible, just to get them done and out. Sometimes that's someone else needs you to do something, and it's like just do the specific thing they're asking you to do and then get it back to them. Rather than doing the perfectionist thing, which again brings us back to personalities. If you're a perfectionist, and then we kind of take too long looking at it, looking into it, and then kind of like doing too much with it, and then giving it back to them. We've now given them a 45-page document that when they only wanted 4 bullet points on a list, and it's just too much anyway. It was a waste of time in that sense. So if you're doing stuff for other people, what specifically do they need from you? But yeah, so that's however you choose to prioritize. Business impact is a good way of doing that. What is the most impactful thing that I can do? Whether that's being measured financially or whether that's depends on what your thing is, whether that's for the good of best results, that becomes your prioritizing, and then schedule it in. Book me. But I love this idea. If you're using Outlook, book meetings with yourself. So what, if we have a meeting with somebody else, we book a meeting with somebody else, whether that's on Teams or we're in the real world or however it is, and we book it into the calendar, and then it is there, and it's quite solid in that we don't, we're trying to avoid that. Then if you're booking something else, then you book it around that. You don't book it at the same time as that, and it would have to be something quite emergency driven to sort of go, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to be able to make that meeting. Does that make sense? So book in a few meetings with yourself. You don't have to put that on Outlook, particularly if you're part of a company. Don't be saying meeting with myself, because that just sounds weird. But it just block time out that then becomes time to get on with certain things that you. It's as I say, it's a meeting with yourself or a meeting with your project at that particular point. Um, Again, go on.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really interesting. I mean, I think we all I speak on behalf of everyone, but I think we can all take that. We need to make time for that bit to focus on yourself, to get yourself in that headspace to be able to achieve a goal or whatever it is. But you do need that time just to dedicate. And I know from speaking to a lot of business owners that we always say we haven't got time, we don't, but I think you have to almost like force yourself to do it and block that space of time just to have that breathing space to perhaps try and see it from another angle or whatever. And I think that's where speaking to other people is a great thing as well, isn't it? Where you can bounce things off other people. Yes. And not feel alone, particularly if you are working alone as a sole trader or entrepreneur themselves. Great, that's great. Thank you so much for that. And I've got another one which is about building confidence. Now, at the moment, obviously, with the cost of living crisis, people are being pressured, sole traders are being pressured for like pricing changes, so cutting their prices to compete on costs, all those sort of things. And it's building sort of confidence on charging what they're worth. And I think people really struggle with this whole worth, what, you know, whether it's they're selling their service or they're selling a product or a business, you know, like in a shop or whatever in retail. I just would love to know your sort of take on that, about building that confidence with getting it right, you know, getting it right and feeling good about doing what you're doing.
Yes, there's a paradox in here, and it is between how much we feel we're worth and want to charge versus sometimes what the marketplace will tolerate. Um, and there is also the paradox of overcharge, undercharge, which sounds like the beginning of the Wombles theme tune, but it's like that. Am I kind of like, am I just blowing myself out of the market, quite frankly, because I'm too expensive in that sense. But there is also the undercharging as well, where people look at that and kind of go, you charge that much? Okay. Well, I might go with someone who charges a bit more because that's quality or something. There's just an association, and trying to find that happy space. Obviously, that does mean there's a range. There's a something there, and I think for me, the confidence part is that core. I know what I'm worth. That's the kind of like that's the um, and it's, are you in it just for profit? Are you in it to pay the bills? You know, like what's the deal? I think as soon as we become profit driven, that becomes the be all and end all. I want to make more money. You know, that for me personally, that doesn't work for me. And maybe that's my values. And of course, now we talk about our own personal values, which are linked with, am I being integrous? Am I kind of like in tune with what's important to me, my own values? Because as soon as we start doing stuff which doesn't fit that or doesn't feel good, then that knocks our confidence. It erodes our self-esteem if we continually do stuff which doesn't fit our internal values. Does that make sense? Um, so
Yes, it does totally. That makes sense. I'm just thinking as well, though, about if you've got a team as well to think about within that. You know, sometimes
yeah,
it's just not someone who's on their own as well. They've got to think
yeah,
about building in the costs, you
yeah,
know, the costs and the pricing structure
yeah,
and keeping a team in, you know, as well.
yes. And there's, so let's there's your side of it, and then there's the potential customer client side of it as well. So who might buy the service or the product. But let's go with you first of all. Yes, there is. I'm. This is not my area of expertise in terms of absolute. Like this is how much you add this plus that, and then that becomes that. It's something I have. Funnily enough, I've helped model in a couple of companies where they are looking at how do we charge, because it's all a bit random at the moment, and help them to establish what their kind of like their layers are that kind of need to come into play, some of which are givens, like you just said, the costs. We need to meet our costs, and that includes paying people, if it's a team. That's a fundamental. Then on top of that, there's what else are we bringing to that with other people don't bring, and the kind of, there's also, for example, you've got qualifications of any sort, or you've studied. How much have you spent on that over the years as well to become an expert in your field? What's that taken, or just simply the experience and worth? So yeah, there's the meeting the costs in the first place, and then, as I said, the kind of like what else do you bring to the table? What else do you offer? But the other side of all of this is that's all very well sitting in a room, kind of going, this is how much we shall charge. Because this is how much either we're worth or this is what we need. But then there's the reality is it's kind of partly market dependent. The way I've always worked is, if if I'm running, I mean, obviously I run training courses as well as doing coaching one to one. If I'm running a training course for a company that's based in London, and I'm going to be real, I won't give figures, but I charge more to companies that are based in London because they expect it. And if I go in, I have my kind of what I call local rates. If I'm kind of like that would be kind of Kent, Sussex region. I have a kind of what I call a local rate, and that's just kind of standard rate. But if I did that rate, if I did that in London, they'd look at me and kind of go, "What? Well, you just, nobody then." It's like I have to, even if I don't want to, I have to charge more because it's London. Then, then I've got my local rate. Then I also have well, I used to do a lot of work with local government, local authorities. Obviously, they have just gone, kind of like there's still people running courses for them, but they've dropped a lot of that and gone into the kind of competitive tendering processes, etc. Where at that point, that's another interesting. Well, you don't, if you're going for a tender, if you're going for a piece of work that other people are going for, so there are some companies, and unfortunately, local authorities, despite what they said, were kind of going with the cheaper option. So which that's hard going because it's like I don't know what other people are charging in this situation, but you just have to go into a rate that makes sense to you. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. But then there's also I kind of have what I would call charity. So I have a charity rate as well. Does that make sense? I'm trying to respond to different areas. Like the charity sector would not look at me because of the charge, my normal daily rate, for example, compared to, like that I would do for business. They can't afford that. So they just go, oh, well, it's been nice talking to you. So I either then just go, okay, well, I won't work with charities, for example, or, with local government, I had a local government rate, which also fits with things like universities, colleges, schools. Again, universities, my experience is just recently over this year, I've kind of gone, we're not doing any learning and development. We're not doing any externalized training because they are going through the ringer. I guess I could do voluntary courses for them, I guess. But just so I think for me, it's about being realistic to who are you serving, and kind of how much is it worth to them? What are your competitors charging? Are you charging yourself out or under? But I've never been, again, I can only speak for myself. I've never been, and unfortunately Melody as well, we've never been the couple that wanted the yacht. It's not been on our, it's not something we've ever needed or wanted. We don't need big profits. And I know that's different for everybody, but you said cost of living, sometimes it's just paying the bills. And I guess the ultimate question, if you are charging what you need to charge, but that means you're outpricing yourself, you're overpricing, and that's just to meet your fundamentals. Is this the right business model? And I hate to say that to anybody who's set up a business, but does that make sense? It's like, well, if genuinely what I'd have to charge is more than people will pay, then that's not the right business model. That's not a helpful business model.
I think there's an element of that, but I do think at the moment some people have really brilliant ideas, really brilliant sort of concepts and setting up business, but it's tough out there. It's proper.
Yeah, yeah.
So it could be a really good business, but just the timing or the financial situation, the economic situation at the moment, is meaning that people are being challenged all the time. And I think the thing is just, to almost like regroup and then start again, isn't it? It's just keeping that resilience,
Yes.
to try and continue going. So yeah, I get it. The models, majority of the time, the models are slightly wrong or skewed or, but there's an element where we're battling financial costs that we're not in control of. Again, it's that bit that you're not in control of that
Yes.
you can't do
So,
anything about.
so the thing, I guess, for me then is about variable rates. It's like, can you do variable rates rather than having this is what it is.
I think that's a great idea. I think I'm sure people will do that to a certain degree. And I think that's a great option to have. And okay. When things
Just
go
very quick,
wrong. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say just very quickly, just to kind of like, again, this would take us in another direction, and it's probably things that you handle in other sessions, which is fine. That's good. That points in other directions. But I think that is where the mindset part of that is, I've got this great idea, and then I'm going through the prompt, kind of like, okay, so are there problems that people have, which, does this solve for them, and even for me, like, kind of, what's the barriers, etc. But I get to that modeling point, and I'm like, well, has anyone else doing something similar to this that is already successful? And it's like, what can I learn from them? And that whole thing then about where, as I say, this takes us into another direction. Where are those potential customers? And there's no point me going to that event and joining that club if it doesn't contain any of the people that are useful. For me, I'm part of two groups. One is the CIPD, which is the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, and that's because it's the HR people, and that's my people. That's where I'm most likely to find, the people. Even then, it's not saying that's easy either, but that's where they are. I'm also part of, because I'm on the edge of, I'm kind of Sussex. There's what's called the Gatwick Diamond, so that's another kind of networking thing. Now I do that, and this is an important point from a resilience and sanity perspective. The reason I go there is I do get a little bit of business from that, but it's about meeting other people, talking to other people, variety of, and getting to know people. Keep turning up. If you're going to network, keep turning up, because you start to build relationships with people, and they almost become, in a business way, business friends, in that sense, that you can talk to, and it feels good. If you're on your own, so the kind of sole trader kind of idea, or you set your business up, it is a very lonely space. So that's what networking is about for me. That joining a network, whatever that may be, is keep turning up, because you start seeing similar people, and then you start people you like chatting with, and then you never know, it might lead to business. But for me, it's sanity. There's a mental health element to that one as well.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no,
that was.
and no, I totally agree with that. I think, yeah, I think networking and engagement, if you are very isolated in your work environment and not within a team, I think it's very important to build relationships with others around you. I think that's fundamental. Yes, with regard to your mental well-being, as well as ideas, and it's just gathering information and business opportunities, that comes with that as well. So that's great. um when things go wrong, as in losing a client or a product launch fails, and how can you easily, or not, perhaps it's not easily, it's not the right word, but reframe the setbacks and then stay motivated? Is there any sort of like just tips that you can do with regard to that?
Sure, and I think part of that, weirdly, again, it's the preemptive and responsive, reflective. The preemptive, if you're launching something, or even just in the back of one's mind, there is always the what if. So it's always having that what if, mentality, and sometimes that is what if negative. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? What could we do, or what would we do as a result of that? So when something does go wrong, we lose a client, or if any of you have done this at some point, well, I think the phrase is sacked a client who was just becoming more trouble. And I know this is, sounds awful, but sometimes it can happen where a client just literally becomes more problematic than anything else. But we're losing a client in some way, shape, or form. Is that there's a readiness for that? That it's like that's always a possibility, no matter how marvelous we are. Customers and clients, etc., will have their own experiences and their own challenges. So yeah, lose a customer. So there's a preemptive element. Always be prepared for that. So that if it happens, it's not a surprise. It's like, oh nuts, it's disappointing, but we've already got a plan B in that sense. The other side of that is if something does suddenly happen. I mean, particularly with a product launch, you've got to have a plan B. It cannot just be we're putting everything into this and that's all. Like we're risking everything for that, unless you've got a weird some kind of backup plan. But it comes back to this again. Losing a client, that's a problem, or a setback on a product launch, that is a problem. So if it's on reflection, it's like, well, let's come back to, well, kind of why, what's our purpose? Who are we here for? What are we here for? What else could we do differently? It's like the little circle with the arrows coming out. What could we do differently now? And that's the bit where are we trying to get to? Are we still trying to get to the same place? Well, that way didn't work. So therefore it's like, then it's questions again. What could we do differently? Now, if that's kind of with a team, you get the team together. What All right, that's not worked. That's our end game. So keep coming back to the end game. The end game. That's where we're trying to get to. That's our destination point. And then the destination point is there, but there will always be different routes to getting to that space. So that's the mindset part of it. Is just bring yourself back to the bounce back factor concept of where are we trying to get to, what are we trying to achieve, and then start looking at different routes in order to get to that space.
Great. That makes total sense, doesn't it? I think it's all about learning this mindset thing, isn't it? Is to stop yourself and make and question
Yeah.
question things. And I think that's key. And I think those points with regard to the prompt thing is absolutely vital for us to take. I think that's a takeaway from today, for me, and I hope for the other people watching is let's try and get in that mindset where we take a bit of time out and just think about those instead of just trying to jump to the answer straight away.
Yes. Oh, totally. Yes. Yeah. And I genuinely encourage everybody, if it helps, write the questions down or have the questions somewhere. Like the what I've always endeavoured to do, by the way, and I'm hoping it came across or comes across today, is when we talk about mindset, that's still quite a challenging thing to change. And there are other means and methods and tools and tips and techniques, and maybe we'll come on to that in the mentoring section. That let's see to change our state. But the reality is that changing mindset. Well, if we could just change our mindset, then we would. It would just be that easy. Like there's a kind of like, I just press that button now. Oh, now I feel much better. So what I've endeavored to do is translate that into something practical, real world, which is, and it seems to me questions are the things that it sort of stops us in our track. And then we kind of like go, I don't feel good. I don't feel happy. I'm not, oh, that went wrong. It's like, okay, well, what are my questions? Where am I trying to get to? What am I trying to achieve? Does that make sense? Translate it to something actionable and practical. The psychology in and of itself is fascinating, but not always practical. I mean, I come from a psychology background. I feel I can say that. It's like, to be a good leader. Well, the best way to be a good leader is to motivate people. Yeah, okay, all right, that's fair enough. That's nice. Good, thank you. Bye. But it's like, all right, but how do you do that practically on a day-to-day basis? What can you say to people? What can you do with people, for people, actionable behavior-wise that gets you to where you want to be?
And
So
I mean, I probably sort of can answer my own question with this, but I love the idea of being visual and having the questions there in front of me. People don't always work like that, do they? But how can you differentiate between what a person would need or want and how it would sink in?
well, I think, again, that's going to be sort of partly what the question, the question just in the kind of generic question to ask yourself there is, when I do move from out of that space of feeling down, depressed, unhappy, in the past, how have I done that? How have I got myself out of that? Because it's fascinating. Again, on TV, they're often like this. Oh, so and so, like, I don't know, the breakfast morning show, whatever, and it's like, oh, so and so had this dreadful thing happen to them, and da da da, and that's where it stops. It's just this person that's sitting in a pile of unpleasantness. But what they don't talk about so much is the people that were also in that space and are now out the other side. They've kind of moved out, but there's still the desire on the TV to talk about it because it was terrible for that person, terrible for you, wasn't it? And it's like, well, yeah, but they don't give them the space to talk about how they got out of it. So that's the question: is when I've shifted state in the past, when I've moved from one state to another, or if I've kind of moved it back into that resourceful, boom, right, come on, let's get going again. Let me get back at whoa, how have I done that? What is it that works for me? And then great, you've got your own model. That's the model. Find your own. So, yeah, okay. Well, write the questions down. Sometimes people, it's a visual like that is kind of like you've got a picture. The windscreen, by the way, is very much an image I kind of carry with me. That not when I'm necessarily when I'm driving, but it's that kind of idea of, like that windscreen wiper feel thing of moving me back over to, all right, what is good, what is going on that I'm happy about. Let me bring myself back to that. So yeah, I think it can be, it's going to be in the language. Sometimes it's a feeling, sensation. Um, just to give it weirdly for some people, it might be, how do you change your state? It might be a piece of music. It might be that there's a particular song from your past or now that just changes. And your music has the capability to change our state in an instant. And if there is a particular piece of music or song or a band that you associate with up, boom, come on, then that's your go-to place with that. For some people, it's color. Again, another visual one. But if I say to somebody, if they sort of say I'm not in a good space, or let's say I feel nervous, I'm nervous. I love the fact we have a nervous system, by the way. Always fascinates me. Why don't we have a confidence system? But anyway, we've got a nervous system. So the person's feeling nervous. I'm feeling nervous. And if I'm coaching, what I tend to do then is go, okay, if that nervousness had a color, what would that be? And that's going to be individual for that particular individual. That's fine. Okay. So kind of clear screen, boom. How do you want to feel differently? Well, I don't want to feel nervous. Okay. So when you're not feeling nervous, what will you be feeling? Well, I feel confident. Fine. Confident. Now, if confidence had a color, what would that be? And so far in 30 plus years, it's always been a different color. Yeah, da-da. So let's say I don't know, whatever color they come up with confidence, that for now, right here, right now, that's your confidence color. And then you can imagine that color. You could wear that color if you wanted to, but you can imagine that color, imagine things with that color. You can imagine that color, and if that's the color that kind of like, ooh, takes you into a good space. For me, it's that, and we weirdly had this yesterday. That gorgeous blue sky. For me,
Yeah.
that's one of mine. Is that gorgeous clear blue? Even though it isn't summer, it reminds me of summer. It reminds me of warmth. It reminds me, oh, warmth. I remember warmth. And it's that kind of like, that's a color for me that I just, because it's like looking up to the skies, and it has all those associations. So the way we change state is by those associations. If it was that easy, we don't get a manual, do we? We don't get given a manual when we're little kids. Here's how to run your brain. But there are interesting ways into changing state. I know I
Yeah.
went off on a number. I just went sideways on that. Apologies,
No,
but
no,
it was just
no,
about
that's
different things
great
for different
because
people.
I don't know about you, but I jumped in. My brain immediately went to a color.
Yeah,
So just by you saying that made me think about it, and I don't know whether that's the same for everyone else who's listening. But yeah, I just think my brain automatically went to orange, and I have no idea why, but it
yeah,
did. That's the color it went to.
yeah,
So but that's, it's interesting to start thinking about what things you can do. It's like strategies, isn't it? And little tiny things that you could just change your mindset just that little bit to stop being in that negative headspace, and
yeah,
making clarity. I think clearer decisions can be made when you're a bit better in that headspace. Um
yeah.
so I've got one final point I just sort of want to make. We'll probably go over to the Zoom meeting at about 1:45, if anyone wants to
Okay.
join us over there. I just wanted to sort of say final takeaways from this webinar is, if you could give one piece of advice for navigating challenges with confidence, what would it be?
It's I'm going to repeat myself. It's that question. What can I do differently? What could I do differently next time? And what else? And it's just imagine that, dun, 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 gathering more resources, strategies. And that for me is the picture of confidence. I've not seen anyone else come up with that, so it's kind of hopefully it's an original. But no, that is 100% it. By the way, the other thing I love, just in terms of that, sorry, one piece of advice. We often talk about what advice would you give your younger self? I see that on LinkedIn quite a bit. If what advice would you give your younger self? And whilst that's fascinating, I don't think I would have listened. When I was like 15, 20, I could have gone, oh, now listen here, young man, and talk. I'd have been, yeah, all right, mate. What's more fascinating to me is, what advice would my 15-year-old self give me that I could take? I love that.